Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, as the legislature gets down to business looking at Governor Rendell's budget proposal, we'll continue our assessments of them with some representatives of the business community. But first, our popular financial literacy update when we return.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, Governor Rendell is getting down to business. He has to deal with his problem with the Pennsylvania highways on the interstates, and there's a whole bunch of legislative hearings going on in Harrisburg last week, or went on last week. We'll pick those up in the upcoming weeks. But first, we're going to hear from our friends from the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association for the regular financial literacy update. And as always, welcome Michael Wishnow, Senior Vice President from the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, and Barb Fortney from the Lancaster Federal Credit Union. Did I get all that right? Lanco. Well, it's the same. Lancaster, Lanco.
It's really Lanco.
It's really Lanco. We'll get that right. But you're located in Lancaster County, right?
Yes.
All right. Well, we got that right. At any rate, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
All right. Michael, let's start in general with, I want to start with you, and then we're going to talk about the sort of outreach to the minority community that the credit unions have made. Talk in general, if you will, about how important you think that subject is to give a credit and to find ways to help folks in the minority community build, a sound credit so that they can, have the benefits of, the middle class in our country.
Absolutely, Terry. There are literally thousands of unbanked individuals across Pennsylvania and across this country. Many of them are in minority communities. And so credit unions, as part of their social mission, are reaching out to those folks that are getting ripped off by the payday lenders and the check cashers and the pawnbrokers and all the people that are got their hand in their wallet to try and bring them into the mainstream financial system through getting credit union services. All
right. Now, Barb, you in Lancaster, if I understand this correctly, there's a consortium of 7 credit unions, and they've pulled their resources to target, if I understand this correctly, financial education and other efforts to reach minority communities. And in particular, you have a program dedicated to the Hispanic community. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, we've reached a partnership agreement with WLCH, which is Centro Radio for Hispanics in Lancaster County, also in York County and in Reading. And we support the program You and Your Money. Mm-hmm. And this is a half-hour program on Wednesdays. It starts at 10:30 in the morning. And it's all on financial literacy, on credit checks, on how to buy a home, on your checking account, how to manage your money. And it's become very popular, and it has, I think, the largest call-in rate of any of the radio programs.
Great.
In response.
Now, Mike, one of the problems I think that in this great amalgam that we call America is that we get folks from so many different cultures who come and have, in some cases, very little experience with the foundations of sort of American finance. How is that important to what this approach is about? I mean, talk a little bit about why that's important at the earliest stages to begin to gain some better understanding of a financial wherewithal, the things that we talk about all the time in here, establishing good credit, don't misuse your credit cards. I mean, things that you and I have been chatting about now for several years. Yeah, when waves of immigrants have come to our country, they often start on the bottom rung of the economic ladder. Yeah. And that's true of every wave of immigrants over the last couple hundred years. The Hispanic population, particularly in Lancaster County, many of them are doing farm work. Many of them are doing some of the lower wage jobs. And frankly, they're the ones that really can benefit the most from being a credit union member. Right, Barb?
Right, right. One thing that we've learned through this process of partnering with WLCH is that a lot of the Hispanics that come to the United States are used to financial institutes in their countries that they couldn't trust. And so they turn to their neighbors and their friends and their family,
Yeah.
and they form their own little cooperative. And that's how they borrow money or save money and so on and so forth, is amongst each other. Well, they come to the United States and they're still doing that. And that then doesn't provide them with any credit history or anything else when they want to go and buy a home.
Yeah, I mean,
It's the trust issue of financial institutes that's
Well,
important.
talking about the trust issue, and we've talked about this, Mike, you know, these use of, you know, payday lenders and some of these other folks who lend money to not just Hispanics, but all folks in need, and charge them these usurious interest rates. This is aimed at also at helping to eliminate some of those practices, right?
Oh, absolutely. Again, Hispanic folks, many of whom are sending money back to their families overseas, are paying too much for that wire transfer, are paying too much for virtually every financial transaction. So if they can develop a trust with a credit union like Lanco, or any mainstream financial institution, credit union or bank, they can really save a whole lot of money on what it is that they're normally doing financially.
All right, we're about out of time. Say something about the radio program. I think I've been on, I know I have been WLCH during the fall political season to give some political commentary. You say that, I mean, is that now the major link, in a sense, way to communicate with a larger audience that you're aware of in the Lancaster area?
Definitely, because they have this program in Spanish. They do some English,
Sure.
but we've even sent Spanish-speaking credit union employees there to be on the program. They welcome any help that they can get. But the idea is that people are very comfortable listening to it, and they trust it.
Yep.
They trust the radio
great.
station.
That's great.
And
All right.
those on it.
Thanks for the great update. We'll be back. We're going to have representatives from the business community take a look at Rendell's budget. Maybe we'll talk about a little politics. What else on Pennsylvania Newsmakers when we return.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, as I indicated before, we've been doing this series of programs in response to Governor Rendell's budget. The governor was on a couple of weeks ago and made his case. Some of his cabinet officials have been on making their case. Well, at least one, Donna Cooper, the governor's policy director, was on the program. We've been getting a response. Now it's the business community's turn to respond to the Rendell budget. Joining me, as often is the case, is Fred Anton. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, and Gene Barr, who is the vice president for governmental relations with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Governmental or government?
Either one.
Either one, I
know.
They
both work.
It's the same thing.
They both work.
All right. Look, Fred, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Gene. Governor's budget, not a huge increase in terms of percentage, 3.5 or 6%?
No, it's basically 8 or 9%. It's much higher.
Here we go. Okay, $26 billion. What's your general reaction to the budget?
My general reaction to the budget is it deals with a whole lot of things that really sort of confuse the situation. In my judgment, we have two fundamental governmental responsibilities here where we've got very, very serious problems. They are transportation,
right.
1, and 2, education. And I believe much more focus, that a focus ought to be put on solving those two problems, and a lot of these peripheral increases in spending that the governor proposed ought to be put aside for now, because I don't think we can afford to fund them.
Gene.
Terry, I agree with Fred. I think that when you look at this, there's an old saying that says, when you're in a hole, stop digging. And we know that the Commonwealth is headed towards a pretty significant budget deficit here, anywhere between $1.5 $1.9 billion. The governor's proposed a significant number of new or expanded taxes that are of huge concern to us. We believe that they're going to have a significant impact on businesses' competitive nature. For example, even the sales tax that people have talked about as being regressive for lower income people, which there's lots of evidence to that, about 1/3 of that is paid by business. So the sales tax increase in reality as well is a business tax increase.
So what you're saying is that that there's maybe is $1 billion budget, let's use that number, deficit, and then the governor's adding these new programs for which there'll be additional taxes, and there's 6 or 7 taxes as I think we count them up if you look at all the programs. Is that right?
There are a number of new ones. You've got trash taxes and gasoline taxes, and he would dispute that it's a gasoline tax, but he's taxing oil companies who will provide, and you can expect that they might pass that on.
All right, let's talk about that. One of the big ideas, I mean, everybody recognizes we have a serious problem with roads and bridges and mass transit in this state. I think everybody recognizes that. Miles and miles of roads, hundreds of miles of roads in disrepair, countless number of bridges. Similarly, the governor says, and he has 2 big ideas, and I want to talk about those. Fred, let me start with you. He thinks we ought to lease the turnpike under certain conditions. In general, what's your response to that?
My response is the details, even the major details of the program, have not been laid out.
Okay.
Even the most superficial analysis to get $10 or $12 billion up front. The people who give that $10 or $12 billion, the investment bankers who put the program together, will be highly compensated. And those who put the money up have to get their money back with a substantial profit, like 20% minimum profit. So, therefore, I maintain that a better approach to the road problem would be a public-private partnership. I don't want to see government, particularly the Rendell administration, get a big amount of cash up front, because I think they will be tempted to spend it in many, many different ways.
We're going to go to a break, but is this a good or a bad idea?
I think we've got to explore public-private partnerships. We've got to find new ways of delivering efficiencies to the system, and if we can find a way to make that work and deliver money for needed roads and bridges.
So you're at least open to looking at the lease as long as it goes, you get away with Fred's concern that it goes to that and not to other things.
And I think there's another concern. The more conditions you put on it, sure, we'll lease it, but you've got to provide this, and this. That reduces the amount of money someone's willing to pay for it.
All right, we're dealing with Governor Rendell's very ambitious budget with 2 representatives from the business community, and we'll continue this discussion after these messages.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money, and by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education, 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers with Fred, Anton, and Gene Barr, 2 regular contributors, business folks who come in and chat with us, given the business viewpoint. All right, we're talking about Governor Rendell's agenda now, the highways, bridges on the one hand and mass transit on the other. Not arguably a very serious problem. Governor's trying to figure out how to pay for all of this. The other idea is, Gene, let me start with you, this tax on gross oil receipts. I guess that's the... Now, the governor argues that oil companies evade 85 or 90% of what the taxes that should come to the state because of the bookkeeping devices that they use. Is this a good tax or a bad tax?
Well, we've not seen any evidence on the evasion part. But look, let's be honest. They are very popular targets. Unfortunately, it's a horrible idea because you've selected one particular part of Pennsylvania's economy for a targeted tax. And this is going to result probably, as all businesses do, they attempt to pass their costs
higher
on.
Gas price, yeah.
But also, if you've got one of the companies saying, well, the only reason we're being taxed is because we sell product into Pennsylvania, they may decide not to sell product, which means our reliability is threatened. So it's a horrible idea. It's oil companies now, but who knows who the target is next year if we believe you're too successful.
But you're right. It's probably, of all the things that he proposed, the most popular given the oil price profits. Go ahead, Fred.
One of the modus operandi of Governor Rendell in attempting to sell his programs is this. We're going to put in some benefit. We're going to improve the roads, and it's going to cost you, the taxpayer, nothing. Now, that is the ploy that he's using. Of course, this is Plan B. The oil tax is Plan B. The ploy is it's going to cost you nothing. The oil companies are going to pay. Everything I have heard indicates that there's no way to prevent the oil companies from passing these taxes on to the consumer. They don't need to pass it on directly. They can pass it on indirectly in the chain of command, in the chain of...
I asked the governor, Fred, I asked the governor about that, and he, we'll give the Attorney General enforcement power, and I think there would go ahead. A lot of skepticism. Go ahead.
We don't know how you do it. I just don't know how you make that kind of thing work. All businesses are going to attempt to pass on their costs. They're going to make the attempt. But how successful they are, who knows?
Let me say one more thing, Terry. This idea that because money comes from somewhere and not directly from the public to fund a program, that it costs the taxpayers nothing is the most simplistic concept that I heard. It's going to cost the public something because those dollars could be used for something else.
No free lunch.
No free There's no free lunch.
Fred,
There's no free lunch.
We're going to deal with health care. We've had some programs on the health care already. Let's get your perspective on the governor's very ambitious prescription for Pennsylvania.
Sure.
This program that they're making this effort to cover, almost 1 million Pennsylvanians without any coverage. In a sense, there would be a tax on employers, with 50 or fewer people who don't provide health care coverage. Go through the mechanics of that and what your concerns are.
Well, you've hit on, I think, which is one of the biggest concerns we have. First off, we've not taken an official position because just as the governor is, we're concerned about people that don't have health insurance as well. And there's a distinct difference between health care and health insurance because hospitals and doctors are required to treat. So you have to make that distinction. But we're concerned about a payroll tax because it makes the assumption that business is responsible for this societal issue. And this 3%, in fact, the way that it's drawn up, will be assessed on everyone. And then L&I, from what we can see, labor and industry will have to make some decisions about whether or not your plan, if you offer one, is acceptable. That's how this is, from what we can see, is being drawn up. So it is a 3% payroll tax, and our concern is we don't know the ultimate cost of the program. So maybe it's 3% to start, then it's 4%, and then maybe it broadens. We don't know what the ultimate cost is.
What do you think, Fred?
The defense of this is not in the details. The defense of this is we need health insurance reform. We need it on a national basis. Governor Rendell has done an excellent job, and the legislature is going with him in funding for the poorest members of our society, children and so forth. We just can't afford the cost of universal health insurance.
So this is, Fred, is your point, this is the problem in search of a national solution?
Yes, it is. And I also,
that's a good point.
But it also is a philosophical or a political ploy that is absolutely brilliant.
Okay, we got to go to a break. When we come back, I want to continue this discussion. We also have a couple of other pieces of the governor's budget to take up, and we'll do that after, I think, we pay some bills.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Builders Association, building today for a better tomorrow. And by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back. We're talking about Governor Rendell's ambitious second-term agenda. Healthcare is the topic of the moment. You wanted to say something about costs, and go ahead.
Yeah, Terry, I think what's important, too, is to talk, rather than just figure out who's going to be stuck with the bill in terms of who we cover and how we cover them, let's talk a little bit about how we reduce the cost of providing health care. And one of the most important ones is the issue of joint and several liability, which the governor, as candidate, even said he thought was important. Unfortunately, he vetoed the bill that was put on his desk. We'd like to revisit that, as well as other things about making people understand what they're paying for in health care, because it is expensive and costs have been accelerating significantly. We've got to bring that understanding of the cost structure back to the consumer as well.
Okay, let's...
But politically,
go ahead.
But politically, for Ed Rendell to indicate to the voters of Pennsylvania that he's concerned about health care, I think the polls all indicate that that's probably one of the #1 issues that voters are concerned about, and particularly the expansion of the participation in private plans. I mean, all sorts of private employers are requiring employees to pay a larger and larger percentage of the cost.
You know, let me just as an editorial, I mean, I've always thought this is a problem in search of a national solution, that it's asking the taxpayers of one state or the business community or the consumers, forget my view for a moment. Look, I want to turn, we don't have a lot of time left. I was going to do energy, but we'll skip that for another time. I want to talk about property taxes. As you know, it has been the #1 issue in this state for a while. Governor now comes back, wants the sales tax increase in order to accommodate more property tax relief. Fred, what's your general response to that?
Well, my general response is I'm shocked that the governor has come back with this sales tax proposal. Sam Rohr has been around for years with a variation of the sales tax proposal, adding items that are now exempted. And I'm shocked that only a portion of the Rendell sales tax increase would go for property taxes, and the rest would go for the budget. Go ahead.
Well, no, here's the point. The legislature would not approve a sales tax either increase or a reduction with a broadening of the base when 100% of it was going to property tax relief.
That's right.
Now the governor's proposal would only have about half of it. I asked him about that, and he thinks he's still optimistic about it. We got about 40 seconds.
And also, I don't know that we have fully defined yet who we really want to target this property tax relief to. But from the business perspective, the real concern is, as we said earlier, business is going to pay 1/3 of the sales tax increase, yet none of the benefits accrue to business. So it's a business tax to pay for a residential tax cut.
All right, great update. We'll have you back in a couple of months. We'll pick up here and see what's going on when the legislature gets down to looking at this budget in detail. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and stay well.